Women first rode bikes to freedom over 100 years ago. You may have ridden a bike to freedom when you were a little girl like me. And you may be thinking about riding a bike to freedom again. If so, I'd like to help. Hi, I'm Pattie Baker. I'm a League of American Bicyclists cycling instructor and the author of Traveling at the Speed of Bike. I created a class named Pedal Power with Pattie that I've been offering to women in the metropolitan Atlanta area. I really want to see more women out on bikes, however, so I got this idea, why don't I offer it for free to one woman in every state in the United States of America? And then I got to thinking, while traveling at the speed of bike, why not just offer it to everyone? To start, here's a quick glance at some of the women who took my class this past year. I donated a free class at least once every month with a percentage of proceeds from the sale of my book, Traveling at the Speed of Bike, available on Amazon in all global markets in both print and digital editions. To create my proprietary class, I took the 9-hour Smart Cycling curriculum from the League of American Bicyclists and I boiled it down and rearranged it so it would fit a little better into women's busy lives in just an hour and a half to 2-hour class. For the sake of this online class, I've boiled it down even more into a 30-minute version. Keep in mind, I'm not asking anyone to sign any releases, so I'm assuming no liability for this class. Let's start with thinking about riding, because if you can spend a little time considering some important questions, you can make a bike choice and clothing choice and route choices that are going to help your heart sing when you get back on bike. For instance, what kind of bike riding do you see yourself doing? There's very distinctly different types. There's this sport cycling direction, there's the fun and fitness in the park direction, and there's the bike as transportation to actually get places, to run errands or go to work direction. So where do you see bikes fitting in your life? The next set of questions would involve, what is the place where you live like? Is it hilly, where you may need a lot of gears? So if that's the case, don't get seduced by that 1-speed or 3-speed beach cruiser. That's not going to work for you, especially, for instance, not here in hilly Atlanta. And what's the weather like? If you live somewhere particularly rainy or snowy, you may want a little bit fatter tire. What kind of route do you think that you might be riding on? Are you going to be riding somewhere that isn't paved, for instance? That's going to suggest a different type of bike than if you're doing a lot of urban riding on paved roads. Regarding clothing, you do not need any special clothing in order to ride a bike. However, there are a lot of clothing options that can make you more comfortable when you're riding. So depending on the type of riding you do and the type of conditions in which you ride, you may want to give some thought to making some different decisions about what you're wearing. As for route choice, I think that's the most important decision you make anytime you're traveling at the speed of bike. The more comfortable you get on bike and the more tools in the toolbox you get as you develop skills, the more choices you're going to have about routes. As for route choice, the more comfortable you become on bike, the more choices you're going to have. And of course, as you acquire new skills as a result of riding, that will open up new opportunities as well. I do really want to stress, however, that the choices we make on bike reflect very often the amount of risk we're willing to assume for many different reasons, and I think that is a really personal decision. My advice to you would be to make decisions with which you feel comfortable, and do not hesitate to stop, get off your bike, revert to being a pedestrian, or to leave a situation if you can do so, if you don't feel comfortable for any reason. As for fuel choice, for bike riders, that's going to mean food and water. And my best advice for you here is going to be to stay ahead of your hunger and your thirst. I would make sure that you have a good, healthy meal before you start riding. Carry snacks with you. I usually carry grapes, dates, a banana, things like that. And always have water with you. You really do get very thirsty. And for me personally, I have a favorite donut shop as a destination. Bike riders tend to love to support local places to eat. Let's just talk a little bit more in detail about helmets, since we're talking about clothing and equipment here. You do want to wear a helmet in general, even if where you live does not require it by law. It's just a good idea in most circumstances. Some folks may decide not to wear one in circumstances where they feel particularly safe or they're hot or bothersome to them. Let that be an individual decision, but I would strongly suggest it even when you're separated from motor vehicle traffic, such as on a multi-use path, because there are still a lot of variables, such as dogs on leashes and a lot of folks moving in different directions. Folks might change directions suddenly. There could be hazards on the path. There could be a squirrel that runs across, especially in the fall. They're gathering nuts and they're running everywhere right now. So do keep it in mind. Don't worry about spending a lot of money on a helmet unless you have the resources and the desire and you want the extra comfort and features. If it's certified for safety, then the price doesn't matter. You don't need to spend a lot of money to participate in bike riding. So when you put your helmet on, you want to make sure the straps are adjusted so that they form V's under your ears. You want the strap underneath your chin to allow only about 1 to 2 fingers worth of room. You don't want it so tight, but you do want a little bit of room and not more than that so that it's snug on your head. And you also want the helmet to be far enough forward so that there's only about 2 fingers between your eyebrows and the top of the helmet, so that if you were to fall, that your head is being protected. Many helmets have a little wheel on the back that you can turn to make the helmet a little more snug on your head without making the straps that much tighter. So these are things to keep in mind. A lot of people don't wear helmets fitting correctly and securely, so try to take a look at that before you start riding. Right before riding, the League of American Bicyclists recommends that you do something called the ABC Quick Check. And this is a way to make sure that your bike is ride ready. And by doing that, you'll be able to eliminate some of the problems that can create some unsafe conditions when you're out there riding. So hey, why not? Let's get rid of anything that we have control over and position ourselves for as much success as possible so we can enjoy our bike rides. So very briefly, ABC Quick Check refers to the following components. A is for air pressure, and you want to make sure that your tires are inflated appropriately so that you can have the most enjoyable and safest ride with reduced incidence of getting a flat. So you can either purchase an air pump, and frankly, I have purchased ones that are, the cheapest they have, and they've been perfectly fine for years. So there are certainly a lot of options when you go into any kind of a bike store, but you don't need to go crazy with your budget in order to enjoy yourself on a bike. Also, a lot of public parks nowadays and other places around cities have bike repair stations that include air pumps. So the only things you want to learn about in regards to your particular bike that you've chosen to ride are what your pounds per square inch are for that bike, and it's usually written on the tire, and also what kind of valve you have. There's 2 different types, Schrader and Presta, and you'll want to purchase a pump that has at least that valve. A lot of them have both. So you just want to know the difference about that and how to use it. And then you basically just attach the valve, secure it, and pump it up until it the gauge that tells you the amount of pounds per square inch matches the amount that should be in your particular tire. And you can learn more about that online, but that just gives you a brief overview. The B is for brakes, and brakes are our best friend when we are riding our bike. Believe me, you want to make sure that those work, and anyone that you're riding with is comfortable with using their brakes as well before you get going. Here in Atlanta, where I live, it's very hilly, so brakes have become just one of the most important things that I talk about during classes. So most bikes, the right brake is going to work your back wheel, and the left brake is going to work your front wheel. And you're going to want to pull your brake levers and make sure that they're not pulling any closer to the handles than, let's say, 1 or 2 fingers away. If they're pulling too close, you're going to need to get your brakes adjusted. There are some simple ways that you can do that, and then there are times when you're going to need to bring it to the bike shop. Again, these are some things to explore a little more fully online, but this is a great opportunity to mention you do want a relationship with your local bike shop, and I really do want to stress that you establish that as soon as possible. Bike shops are really feeling the strain from online sales, and if they can't stay in business, we are going to have nowhere to get our bikes serviced. So do support them as much as possible, and do establish a relationship with them so that you can get your bike repaired, because they do need repair and maintenance, with some kind of regularity. The C stands for chain and cassette, and that's that whole area in the back where all the stuff is happening. There's much more official ways to refer to all of this, but the big thing you want to do is check that chain out. You can see mine here looks a little rusty. It's going to be time for its monthly or so lubricating. I actually use a dual cleaning lubricating formula to make sure that all the grit and grime is cleared out and that the chain can move smoothly across the gears. My local REI offers a basic bike maintenance class that is about an hour and a half long, and it's free. Take a look around where you live at a local bike shop or REI to see if you can take a class like that. They'll show you how to kind of clean and lube and check your bike, some of these things that we're talking about. And it's just a great set of skills to have, again, in your toolbox. But if you've been out riding and it was muddy or filled with leaves or sticks or whatever, you might have some particular gunk or junk in your chain, and you do want to double check that before you go out. One of my students just told me that when she did her ABC Quick Check recently, her headphones were dangling in her chain. They had fallen off her, she had lost them, and there they were. So it was a good thing that she checked. The quick part of the ABC Quick Check is to double check these quick release levers, and your bike may or may not have them. Many bikes have them on both the front wheel, the back wheel, and the seat, and they enable you to quickly and easily remove those items. However, they can also open, or if you have taken the wheel off, for instance, to take your bike in the car somewhere, you may not have put it back on securely. You might have been rushed and thought, maybe I'll do that next time, or whatever. It just may not be on correctly or tightened enough. So you want to make sure you do that, and you also want to make sure that the lever is pointing upwards so that a rock or something else from the street can't bounce up and knock it up and open it up while you're riding. The seat quick release enables you to raise the seat higher and lower, and let's just talk briefly about that a minute. Your correct height when you're riding a bike is so that your leg on the pedal all the way down You want your leg to be your knee to be slightly bent. And it's important that you get the height right on this, because if you're too low, you can feel some strain in your knees, and if you're too high, you can feel some strain in your hips. Sometimes when folks are new or returning to bikes, you may be more comfortable with your seat a little bit lower than recommended. And I would say just do that. Just do what you feel comfortable with. You feel a little bit more comfortable with your feet possibly all the way on the ground. In reality, you only need them to be touching the ground. But if you're more comfortable like that, start that way. As you're riding and it starts to feel a little bit more natural, you'll most likely want to raise your seat a little bit, and the quick release enables you to do that quickly and easily. Just be sure that it is securely fastened. And finally, the check part of the ABC Quick Check means that before you head out onto the trail, the bike lane, the open street, wherever it is you're going, just do a little loop around your driveway or the parking lot, wherever you happen to be. Just do a little loop and make sure everything feels secure and sounds right. And the more you ride your bike, the more this will be second nature to you. You will know immediately if something is not right, something's a little bit off or sounds funny, whatever. But just do that. And now you will have eliminated the potential for a lot of problems by making sure your bike is ride ready and that you're ride ready. Stretch a little bit, make sure that you have no distractions. If you like to ride with your music, I would suggest one earbud in, one out. Just make sure that you are positioning yourself in a way that you are alert and aware and ride ready. As for any additional equipment, you're required to have a rear reflector. You're also required to have lights both in the front and the back if you're riding in the dark. You'll want a locking system. I use a U-lock and a steel cable that I'm able to secure both the front and back tire and the frame of the bike to a bike rack. You also may want a rack to go on the back of your bike for carrying items. I'm a big fan of bungee cords. They come in very handy. You can also get some special bike bags to carry things in. And you'll also want a bell so that you can give audible signal when you're passing people. Woohoo! It's finally time to get on our bikes. And when I do my in-person classes, you can feel the excitement in the air when we get to this point. Some people haven't been on a bike in years. Some people might have had a fall or some other negative experience when they were really very young and they still haven't quite gotten over it. Other folks might have some physical challenge that has happened since they were an adult that makes them think that they're not really sure they can do this anymore. My goal is to help you have as many tools in the toolbox as possible so that you can find your way forward. So we're going to take a little time talking about those different aspects now. First, we're going to talk about simple bike handling skills. These are things that you may take for granted and you may not even realize that you know, and that they're critically important to being able to keep yourself safe in diverse situations on your bike in today's society. So a lot of things you may have learned as a kid, I'm just going to mention. I invite you to spend a little more time online, just brushing up on these skills. They do help you to be safe in situations where there's multiple forms of transportation, and especially if you're in an on-road situation with motor vehicles. Being able to power start your bike, putting your pedal in a 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock position, depending on whether you use the left foot or the right foot, so that you can get off to a quick and secure start, for instance, if you're at an intersection. Being able to ride your bike straight, simple childhood skill can be life and death if you happen to be in a narrow bike lane or somewhere where there is a hazard or other condition that requires you to be predictable to those around you. and to safely get through a situation. Other things that are important include being able to brake. You want to brake with both hands or with your right hand. You don't want to brake with your left hand, especially if you're going downhill. You're going to fly over your bike if that happens. Being able to scan, both hands on the handlebars, bike going straight ahead, and then you're turning to the left, and also practice turning to the right to be able to look over your shoulder and so you can see what's happening around you. Being able to signal. You want to relearn your signals. Signals are going to be really important for communicating around you. The more predictable you can be, the more you can communicate with those around you, the safer you're going to be. This is all within your control, and they're basic bike handling skills. So power starts, riding straight, braking, scanning, and signaling. Do a little practice on all of those things. Start there. Okay, once you feel like you have mastered control of your bike, now you're going to imagine yourself out there with all these other variables happening around you. And these are now things that you're not proactively taking care of, but you are reacting to. And by having tools in your toolbox to deal with common occurrences that can happen, such as someone cutting you off, it could be another bike rider or a jogger or a dog walker or a rollerblader on a multi-use path, or it could be a truck or a car or a bus at an intersection. But someone cutting you off, either making a right in front of you or making a left in front of you, or in some other way blocking you, requires you to have some sort of reaction techniques in your back pocket or in your toolbox. And some of the ones that I like to teach in the basic bike skills pedal power with Pattie class are the quick stop and the rock dodge. And you can find some information about both of these things on the League of American Bicyclists website. Take a look at what's involved with a quick stop and a rock dodge, and practice those things in a parking lot or a park when you have some space and time to do that. They are both skills that can become second nature if you practice them enough. So at the time when you need them, you have mastered the skill. There are about, 6 or 8 other recommended hazard avoidance skills that the League of American Bicyclists goes into some detail about. So take them one at a time and just build your toolbox, and you'll be ready for a lot of different circumstances that are out there. By taking control of your bike handling and hazard avoidance, you will eliminate the overwhelming majority of potentials for crashes and other accidents and incidents that can happen when you're on the bike, and you will increase your safety and your comfort dramatically. Additional things to know are bike law and motor vehicle law in general where you live. In the state of Georgia, where I live, and in many states, bicycles are considered vehicles on the road and must follow all the same rules, but also have the same privileges as other motor vehicles. Familiarize yourself with those rules. One of the problems that folks get into sometimes is there's a law that says that bike riders must ride as far right as practicable on roads. Now, practicable doesn't mean you must ride as far right as possible. There are lots of times when it makes sense and it's legally allowed and it's actually life-saving for you to ride in the middle of the lane. It's called taking the lane, and it is one of the most important skills that you can learn and practice and feel comfortable with. It's particularly easy on a road that has 2 lanes going in the same direction because motor vehicles have the option of simply going over to the other lane and getting around you with no problem. It gets a little bit more stressful on roads where there's only 1 lane going in one direction. I average between 7 and 12 miles per hour when I am riding a bike. And on roads that are 35 miles per hour, drivers can go up to 11 miles faster than that speed limit before they get a ticket. So if someone's going 45 miles an hour and I'm going 10 miles an hour, it's not always the greatest combination. However, I am legally allowed to be in that space. And in my state, there is a 3-foot passing law that a motor vehicle driver is required to give when passing me. It doesn't always happen. I choose my routes carefully as a result. Depends on where I'm riding, and it depends on the culture of that community. There are many communities that have a great deal of pride. Citizens are very involved. Law enforcement is such that those who break the law are penalized. The engineering of the roads is such that access for all is provided. A lot of places that's not the circumstance, so you do have to make appropriate decisions. But you do want to get familiar with bike law where you live, and realize that you have a right to be on that road, and that you also have responsibilities. Some additional principles of traffic law that I like to remind folks to keep in account when they're out there on the roads in particular are to be visible, whatever that means where you happen to ride. I'm not someone who likes to wear a lot of bright colors and lycra and whatnot. I like to wear regular clothes, go regular places, but you do want to be visible. And if that means having those daylight lights on, if that means being in the middle of the lane, of course, makes you more visible. If that means choosing routes that bike riders typically choose, so that there's sort of a power in numbers thing. There's a lot of different ways that you can interpret that. You want to be predictable. We talked about riding in a straight line. Also signaling. If you happen to use a mirror on your handlebar on your bike, don't let that replace the scanning over your shoulder when you're about to change a lane or otherwise make any kind of a maneuver, because when you're glancing over your shoulder, you're sending information to everyone around you that you're thinking about doing something. And anytime you can communicate your intentions, you want to be able to do that. When you are on the road, we talked about being to the right as much as practicable. Also, you want to keep in mind the correct lane for your destination. So if you're not going straight, if you're looking to make a left, you obviously want to be able to do a lane change to get into the left lane in order to make the left-hand turn. You will find a lot of information on the League of American Bicyclists website about lane positioning, how we sort of think about the lane as bike riders. We divide it into threes, and we kind of position ourselves according to our destination on that route, on that part of the road. But you can find out more about this at the League of American Bicyclists website. Help you visualize where you position yourself in the lane, how you do a lane change, what your options are in various traffic situations. There's always an option. You can always, if you happen to be on the right but you want to make a left and you're not comfortable getting into that left lane, or you don't have time to do it, you can always get off your bike at the intersection and cross as a pedestrian. You can make a right and kind of circle around and then come at the intersection straight from the other, from the perpendicular direction. You have options. You are in control. Do what you're comfortable with and do it safely. At the end of the class, I don't like to leave folks just with the skills that you might need when riding. I like to talk a little bit about what happens after you get off that bike. And one part of it is bike care. And again, we talked a little bit earlier about taking a basic bike maintenance class. A general rule of thumb, in addition to checking the brakes and oil, lubing your chain and cleaning your equipment, wiping down mud and whatnot from your bike, a general rule of thumb for me is to kind of get into a habit of always leaving the helmet in the same place, leaving the locks in the same place. I have rechargeable lights, so I always want to make sure that I'm charging them as soon as I come home so they're ready to go the next time. I also often wear a GoPro camera, and then that needs to be charged and other things. So to kind of get into some good habits of bike care and after riding care for your equipment. Also personally, kind of get a feel for what you need after you ride a bike. Are your muscles sore? And that, by the way, will go away. Your butt, your legs, your core, your arms. You may feel that at first, but that will get stronger. All of those body parts will get stronger. And for me, when I get off a bike now, I don't feel any soreness at all. But that doesn't mean that you don't take a little time to take care of your body, whatever it is that you need to do after riding. But the most important thing I think that you walk away with after you've been riding your bike here in most of our cities in the United States is that you see that there is great room for improvement. And I have a saying that all roads lead to City Hall once you start riding bikes, and I think you will probably see how that happens as well. There's always something that can be a little better. There's always a disconnect or a danger spot that folks at City Hall just may not really understand. Your city may be using old guidelines. Your city may be run by folks who actually don't ride bikes themselves, or don't ride them for the reasons that you and increasingly others around our country are riding them. Also, folks with disabilities are finding that bikes are fantastic mobility aids, and that presents some challenges sometimes for the kind of infrastructure that they may find more conducive to their use. Also, women and children have some very, very specific desires. In my in-person classes, obviously we go into a lot of practicing of the skills that we've talked about here today. My hope is that this little sample of what's possible on bike reminds you of what it used to feel like to be in love with bike riding, or plants the seed of possibility that bikes can play a part in your future life. And by the way, if you don't already have a bike and you're not sure if you want to invest in one, your city may have a bike share program that gives you a great opportunity to try it out, sometimes at no cost. So that's it. I hope to see you out there traveling at the speed of bike. I'd also love it if you'd check out my book on Amazon. And see my blog, travelingatthespeedofbike.com, for all kinds of free bonus resources.